Hi, welcome everyone to the November Accounts Receivable Core Committee. My name is Gerald Floyd. I'm the Swarm Coordinator here at DAS. Just a reminder for everyone, we are recording this particular meeting for those that aren't able to attend. And so just be aware of that as we go through the remainder of the meeting. Hopefully I've got the right screen shared and you should be seeing the agenda for today. Please somebody chat me if that is not the case. But wanted to kind of share with you a couple of the different data summaries and analysis that we've been working on now that the 2022 LFO season is complete. So we'll switch screens here and jump into that. And I apologize, I will attach these to the minutes. So if some of these are a little small to see, you'll be able to review those as we, in the minutes, excuse me. So don't worry. This is just kind of a chance to go over some high level, information. This is a comparison of the FY21 versus 22. For section 2, the notable, pieces for me is there's a slight addition to or increase, I should say, in the additions. Not much, but just very slight. But more than that, the collections had a $31.5 million increase. Although coming out of FY21 and the pandemic and so forth, hopefully we'll start to see those numbers continue to increase as we go through the next few years and hopefully get us back to pre-pandemic levels. Other than that, adjustments were a notable increase in the negative adjustments by about 89 million. And kind of tied to that a little bit is the reversals went down compared to FY21. And overall, about $115 million decrease in the ending balance. So collections are up, ending balance is down. Those are the two key takeaways for hopefully what the legislature will see in those numbers. The unassigned non-exempt accounts went down as well as the unassigned non-exempt accounts with no payments for more than 90 days. So again, good news for legislative perspectives that accounts are being assigned and we have fewer agencies that are reporting accounts that would be considered in violation, if you will, of the statute for requiring the assignment. Doubtful accounts had a small increase, but I think that, as accounts are aging and so forth, that is not uncommon. It's not a dramatic swing, so nothing too terribly, scary there. Any questions on section 2 before we move on? All right. So for the accounts at DOR and private collection firms, again, comparing FY21 to 22, additions for DOR were considerably up from FY21. Again, I think part of that is as agencies are coming out of post-pandemic, some of the practices that were in place during the pandemic regarding handling of accounts are beginning to go back to normal. So I think that is to be expected. Related to that, the increase in collections, about $7 million by DOR, which is a positive, of course. And then return to originating agency decreased. This is going to fluctuate every year based on what DOR finds and the accounts in the RWO status. Accounts that are returned back to, for example, the universities, judicial, those types of agencies, that is, actually being returned to the agency. So those are going to fluctuate. So not unexpected results. The ending balance, obviously, because of the additions, had a significant increase compared to FY21. So collections are up, ending balance is up. This ties back to the unassigned non-exempt accounts. More agencies are getting the assignments completed. We would expect to see that ending balance go up for DOR. As far as private collection firms, those agencies that are not subject to centralization, they do report those accounts as being in section 3B at a PCF. Again, additions were up. Collections were pretty static as those accounts are getting out into the hands of the PCF. And then the return to originating agency is about $100 million less than FY21. And so correspondingly, you've got about a $56 million increase in the ending balance at PCF. So again, what we would expect to see as we come out of the pandemic and agencies are getting back into their regular practices of handling their accounts receivable. So again, nothing that we wouldn't have otherwise expected. I think the collections at DOR, again, is a positive thing. So hopefully that's what we can convey through our management report to the legislature and highlight the work that is being done there. Any questions on section 3 data analysis before I move on? Hearing none. So, oh, sorry, went too fast. So this is the exemptions. Again, a lot of different categories here. The overall exemptions were pretty much the same for between FY21 and 22. The notable change is probably most in the DAS approved exemptions. This was due to a change at DOR and how they recognize accounts specifically that are now reported as reversals. And this ties to their decrease in accounts under litigation, mediation, and bankruptcy, although that is offset by other agencies here. So that category didn't fluctuate a ton. The loss of federal funds and federal program funds had a significant drop. And so that kind of balanced out the DAS approved exemptions. And so overall, fairly static information as far as the exemptions go from one year to the next. So as agencies continue to track their accounts, I think we're getting better information overall. So, hopefully we'll see this trend continue without large swings in too many categories. Again, any questions before I move on?
Gerald, on the prohibited by law on the change in number of accounts is equal to 2022. It's not a difference.
Oh, interesting. I must have had a bad formula somewhere.
And then on the statutory exemptions, there's no differential there. And same with administrative exemptions, so I didn't know if you wanted those there or not.
Yeah, those are, the statutory exemptions is sort of like a summary that we do from the LFO data. It's not an actual field within the LFO data. So it is a breakdown. When we do our management report, we kind of lump together the statutory versus the administrative piece. So in this case, the change in the number of accounts and so forth, I was looking at it more from the individual categories, not the subtotal, if you will. So thank you for pointing that out. But that was the reason why I didn't put that change there. It's just the aggregate of all the individual records. Any other questions, comments? Before I put out the minutes, I will fix the accounts for the prohibited by law. I'm not sure what happened there. Must have been a bad copy paste somewhere. Okay. So the next part of this is just a few charts that I did. 21 versus 22 is kind of always a good reference from the prior year and kind of what's happening, but this allows us to look back a couple years before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and then, obviously 22 is the tail end of the pandemic, so to speak. So this kind of just gives us a visual information about various categories. Overall, the additions have gone down. They are static between 21 and 22, but overall those have gone down since FY18. We did see some fluctuations between the DOR and the PCFs. Those went down in 19, but then came back up since then overall. Collections, again, pre-pandemic, we were over 600 million a year. And then as we got to 21 and 22, we saw the impact of how the pandemic created, challenges to collections and agency processing. We're beginning to see that, start to climb back up. Again, as I said earlier, we would expect that to continue over the next few years to get back to pre-pandemic levels. And unfortunately, this is kind of just the way the numbers are displayed, but it's kind of looks very flat for the DOR and the PCF just because of the relative size difference in the numbers. But you can see the small increase over the last year compared to 21. So we would again kind of hope that those will get back to pre-pandemic levels as the agency numbers come back up as well. Write-offs, since this is only in section 2, there's only one line here. You did see the spike here in 19. That's actually related to DOR and then their implementation of system automation that identifies and creates records for accounts that qualify for write-off in their tax system. So that implementation saw that spike. Otherwise, you would kind of see a little bit more of a flatter line between 18 through 21. And then ending balance, we've seen the number come down for the last couple years compared to 18 and 20, where we were over 3.5 billion. And then similarly, the ending balances at DOR and the PCFs. You do see that change between 19 and 20 for the PCFs. That was kind of where because of the change that we had for how the data is reported to LFO, those accounts that had previously been forwarded to a PCF by DOR being put back into the DOR category. That's why you see that drop there. So we kind of would expect to see that number stay fairly static, depending on what happens at some of the larger agencies like DOR, or excuse me, judicial. And so that's kind of where that's going. And then you see the ending balance for DOR going up significantly in 22. Again, as we see more agencies get their accounts out, we would expect to see that number continue to rise as well. As those accounts are processed by DOR, of course, then you'll have the RWOs that will result in them being written off and kind of coming and balancing that out, and we'll find that new plateau. Exemptions, again, this is kind of that breakdown of the overall statutory versus administrative exemptions. We saw a high in 2020 of a little over 1.6 billion in exemptions, and then coming down in 21. There are a few different agencies that were part of that, and we've kind of looked at the information on those, and those have been captured in the management report previously. And I will say, as I begin working on the management report for FY22, any of the data fluctuations between, compared to FY21, both positive and negative, I will be asking agencies to kind of confirm or provide some narratives around what happened to cause that. Was it just a change in process? Was it, for some folks, you've got a one account may account for a large share of their balance, so that can have a big variation for them from one year to the next. But as we start getting into those big swings, we'll look at what agencies comprise the largest portion of that change from one year to the next, and I will be needing their assistance in kind of providing that narrative that can go into that management report. So if you see that's an email from me. That is what that is for, is to help us get the right information into that management report that identifies those changes in the data from one year to the next. Any questions on the LFO data before I kind of jump into some of the ARPM analysis? Hearing none. So this is the FY22. And what we've done here is kind of tried to, find the apples to apples comparisons. So in this particular example for collections in the ARPM data, 65 agencies reported total AR collections that were greater than 0, and they had their target. And so this is their way, our way of being able to look at what is the L&D collections as a percentage of the total AR for those agencies that reported collections. And so here you can see that the actual is about 5.2%. The established targets for FY22, again, this is kind of that culmination of each of the 4 quarters, was 16.2. There's, I think, a few reasons why that can have the swing that it did. You know, folks are still, I think, understanding how the targets, you know, for one, we made the change in the template so that that dollar value of the target is calculated consistently. Whereas in prior years, we had folks kind of coming up with their own methodology for how that dollar value was established. And so, you know, hopefully as we go through the next couple years, especially, but, you know, I will be looking at in those quarterly collections, what was the target, and is the agency making adjustments to their targets as necessary? It's kind of a fine line for me because there's elements to establishing the target that I don't have information on, such as how you're, you know, sort of forecasting what's going to happen in the next quarter. So you may be aware that there is an annual charge that is billed that you're expecting a large collection in that next quarter. I may not know, you know, what that is and why you're establishing a higher target than what your actual was for the prior quarter or the prior year even. So please understand that if I ask a question around your targets, it's to get a better understanding of the methodology that you're using, and that you are incorporating all of the different elements that are from the training into those targets, and not just carrying the same percentage from one quarter to the next without making any adjustments that might be necessary to, you know, have a realistic goal, so to speak. So just be aware that that is one of the things that I intend to focus on a little bit, is to ask a few more questions on the targets and try and help agencies better understand what that process of establishing those targets means. And hopefully the new template will give you the ability to kind of take those assumptions that you are building into your forecasting model and verify that how that calculates in that next quarter once you establish that target, and understand how that can assist you in establishing those targets, that we'll begin to see the actual versus the targets getting a little bit closer here on this L&D collections as a percentage of the total AR. Days to assign. So 37 agencies reported assignments in fiscal year 22 and had established targets for FY22. I make that distinction because there are a number of smaller agencies who may only have one account that got assigned that they weren't expecting. So they basically had a target of 0. But then when they had one account that got assigned, obviously it's going to show up with 100% in one of the columns. And so when you do the comparison of those agencies, those without an established target for FY22 sort of skew the results. And so that variance gets a little harder to, you know, understand why they are the way they are. So this is only those agencies where they reported assignments and had an established target. And then this shows kind of how close were we. And overall, not bad. The over 1 year obviously had the biggest change or variance of 17.7%. I think for me, the one element when you look at the actual is you're only looking at about a little over 50% or so that are being assigned within 0 to 90 days. So these are accounts that once they're subject to the assignment, meaning they're both liquidated and delinquent, and it starts that clock, You know, it's not saying that if you assign it at 3 to 6 months that you are out of compliance, because if you receive a payment within that period of time, or within those 90 days, you get another 90-day cycle. This particular measurement is just saying from the date that it became MCAT eligible, mandatory collection account transfer, to the date that it was assigned. And for example, in over 1 year, maybe somebody who was on a payment plan and then they suddenly stopped making their payments and therefore became subject to the assignment. It's not an indication that you are not compliant with the assignment requirements. It's just helping to understand at what point are the accounts getting transferred. So is 50% being assigned within 90 days make sense? I think that obviously is something that is an agency by agency, you know, there's going to be a lot of variation there. So this being an enterprise view of 37 agencies, 50% may seem right, but that's another area as we get into the next year. Hopefully we can better answer questions. And as folks, you know, I know there was challenges with staffing during the pandemic. Some of that's still ongoing, but hopefully we get those numbers back to a higher percentage being assigned within the 90 days. But we'll, you know, I don't know that these are showing anything good or bad. I think overall the establishment of the targets for, you know, through 12 months has been pretty good. So, you know, from that perspective, I think there's good data there. Days to collect, again, 59 agencies reported accounts that were paid in full and had established targets. So when you do the comparison, you can see the breakdown. I will, just for the sake of pointing this out, the target of the 100.3, this is mostly due to rounding differences. On the template, it does it to the first decimal point. And so sometimes in that rounding, when you have 59 different agencies, where the actual number goes into the hundreds or thousands, you know, it swings it a little bit. So it's 100.3 when I do a sum of, you know, these numbers that were pasted down to the tenths. So it's not an error, it's just a rounding issue at the 100.3 in the total for the target. So overall, again, you've got a good majority of the accounts being paid within 0 to 90 days. You know, you're looking at about 75%. So that's a positive overall, that accounts are getting paid timely, that you've only got 1 out of 4 that are exceeding that period of time. So I think that's great information to see that agencies are doing well in those categories, and the targets overall were pretty close through those 90 days as well, and actually across the board. So I think this is one that folks have a really good handle on, based on the information provided here. And then finally, write-offs as a percent of available AR. There were 29 agencies that reported ARPM write-offs of 42.7 million, and they had an established target for FY22. Their actual rate of write-offs was 0.5%, while the target was 7.7. So on one hand, it's good to see that write-offs are not a high percentage of your overall receivable balances. I do think that this is an area where our target establishment will start to see and can work on some improvements of what is a realistic expectation for write-offs. And part of that may have been people had planned on writing off a bunch of accounts, and then due to, lack of staffing, they just never got entered for FY22. So we may see that pick up for FY23. But again, I'm looking at high level information, making certain assumptions. I don't know if that's in reality what occurred, but when we look at targets, that would be one that, I think we can definitely make some improvements on, although the actual, we were better than what we established in the target. So that's positive there. And with that, that is the last of these slides. So any questions on any of the LFO or ARPM data analysis? Hearing none. Okay. So next on our agenda, kind of similar to what we were just discussing, this is for the FY23 Q1 that was just completed. Total AR collected for Q1, about 1.6 billion. Of that, 98.6 million was associated with an L&D debt for a rate of 6.2%. And the Q1 target was for about 2.5 billion and 600 million in L&D for a percentage of 24%. So a bit lower than what the established target had been, especially on the L&D side. So hopefully that's just kind of a blip, and we'll see that pick up for the remaining quarters of FY23. As a comparison, FY22 Q1 was just over 2 billion in collections, with 114 million in L&D collections for 5.7%. So for FY23, our percentage increased for L&D, but the amount was down by about 15.9 million compared to FY21. Again, not kind of hard to tell from this if that's a trend that something in 23 is decreasing, or if that's kind of the difference in first year of biennium versus second year of a biennium. I know that plays a big thing for DAS billings. So that may be a big piece of that. 90 days past due in FY23 Q1, number of accounts, total outstanding 1.9 million, 90 days past due 1.6 for a percentage rate of 82.8. And we had 66% of the value of our accounts were 90 days past due. So when we compare that with FY22's Q1, we have a little bit higher percentage on the number of accounts, but we decreased on the value of the accounts that are 90 days past due. And so, we have overall a smaller percentage of our value of accounts are 90 days past due, but we saw a decrease overall in both the accounts outstanding and the 90 days past due between FY22 to 23. So not big swings at all. Very, I think, reflective of consistent data from one year to the next. So positive information, in my opinion, that the data is getting better than it was in prior years, and more consistent, I believe. So hopefully we'll see the collections continue to increase. over the next several quarters so that we can continue our trend of overall L&D collections going up. But that will remain to be seen. So any questions on the FY23 quarter one? Seeing none. Okay, moving on in our agenda. DOR OAA update. So I had asked Todd at DOR if they had anything that they wanted to share, and he emailed me. He was unable to attend today, but he did want us to mention, and everyone should have received an updated user guide from Nikki last week, but DOR just completed an update to their Gentax to a new version. And so it has a little different look to it. The user guide that Nikki sent out had some screenshots to kind of help identify what some of those changes are. Primarily, one of the big changes operationally is that within Revenue Online, an agency is no longer able to manage their own users. If a particular user needs to be added or removed from Revenue Online, the agency needs to contact the DOR technical help email box, which is oaa.technicalhelp@dor.oregon.gov. And I will put that in the minutes as well. And then they now manage that process for user changes. But other than that, a few screens may have a little different visual look to them, but other than that, operationally, everything is essentially the same, with the exception of the user management. So asked me to share that, and I think we have, if there's any questions, I think we have, I think Alyssa is here from DOR. Yeah, Alyssa Davalos. So if you have any questions, feel free, and hopefully Alyssa will be able to answer those. Hearing none. Everybody got their unmute. Hopefully you're not asking a question that I can't hear.
Hi, Jared.
Yeah.
This is Kim Hall from the Water Resources Department. So, yeah, yesterday I got onto the Revenue Online and saw their new look. And it caught me by surprise because I had not received anything. I'm not sure if others within my agency may have. So I'm just wondering how I can get my hands on that new user guide.
Kim, I can email the user guide to you. It will be uploaded to our website hopefully this week, the new updated one. The functionality is pretty much the same. It's just the look of it, and then not being able to manage the users is different. But I'll get that emailed out to you today.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Alyssa, in the chat, it sounds like some other folks might not have received it. One of the things that you could do is you could email it to me, and I could attach it to our email with the minutes. And so that way it would kind of go out to that group as well, for
Perfect.
anybody that might not have received it. That way you're not going to get bombarded with individuals saying that they need a copy. So
yeah, I'll email it to you.
Perfect. Any other comments, questions on their new look and feel? Okay. So the next item on our agenda, just kind of wanted to have an open discussion on what agencies might be still experiencing as far as challenges. I'm calling it post-pandemic. I know there's kind of a, where was the official end, and maybe that has or has not been officially defined, but I'm calling it post-pandemic. Accounts receivable challenges. This may be, staffing. It may be technical. It may be, finding or getting a hold of the folks that owe you money and the process of collecting from them. But I just wanted to kind of see if, what some of those challenges were. And, if you're an agency that has had that same experience and you've implemented something as a result and you've seen success, please, jump in and share that as well. This the part of the group where we're able to share with each other, what works well, what doesn't work well, type information. So to me, this is kind of again, looking at the data from the ARPMs and the LFO. It's, we're seeing some positive trends, but there's still, I think, some areas where folks are still struggling. And so hopefully this will be a chance to kind of capture what are those challenges and what can we do and what can I do to assist, as, obviously with the resources that I would be able to do, whether that be training, et cetera. But anyways, it's an open discussion. So does anybody have anything that they'd like to share from their perspective?
Hi, Gerald. This is Doris with DCBS.
Hi.
Hi. So some of the things that I know as far as DCBS in my unit, that we've had a challenge with, not only the understaff, which, I think a lot of agencies are going through, but as I hired a lien and a garnishment specialist, we realized that trying to track liens, even the ones that we've seen a lot of foreclosures coming through. As far as garnishments, we've had a very difficult time trying to find garnishable funds, whether it's through banks, state lands, or third parties. So those are kind of two of the major ones, which are the ones that generate the most money. But we've seen a decrease in those funds coming in due to a lack of information out there. So those are the two largest challenges that we've seen.
Thank you. Does anybody here issue garnishments, and have you seen similar challenges with finding sources of garnishment? Anybody? Any other challenges that agencies are facing?
This is Kim Hall again. One of the challenges that I'm still seeing, and it is improving somewhat, but getting when I invoice and set up an AR to another state agency, the state agencies are very, very slow in getting the invoices paid. I'm having to reach out on multiple occasions to try to find out what's going on, why the payment hasn't been made. And I would say about maybe 20% of it has all been that staff changes. But again, that's a low percentage, so I'm not sure. I've started putting in on my ARs a little blip about, and I don't have it right here in front of me, but about how state agencies timely payment resource. It's OAM 35 70 10 and 20 that reminds the agencies that they should be paying these within 30 days, I believe. Is that right, Gerald?
It's either 30 or 45. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, me either. But anyhow, still seeing some problems, some lag there.
I will discuss that one with Rob, and that may be something that he can discuss as well with George, and we can look at what would be a way to help communicate that, what's already in the policy, and that agencies need to be, applying that. And the big element of that OAM is, if a portion of a bill has a dispute or a question, that's fine. You need to have timely follow-up on the questions that you have as the paying agency, but you should be paying the non-questioned or disputed portion. Don't withhold the whole payment for a small element that might be, in question. And, so I'll discuss that with Rob and George as to, what they feel would be the best way to communicate that. Because I think this is an element where, one, our group, you have, primarily receivables folks. We can preach to the choir, so to speak, but we got to get the message out to the payable staff. And I think it's also, to a certain degree, a bit of a management issue where the agency management needs to understand, that policy and make sure that they are pushing down, so, the support of that policy that says, if there's a portion of a bill that's in dispute, here's the process we need to follow, but we need to be paying the undisputed portion. So I'll see what their thoughts are as to the best way to get that message out to both agency management and to the payable staff at the agencies, so that they can hopefully begin to make an improvement in that. In seeing the chat, it sounds like this is you're not the only one having that issue. I'll put it that way.
Gerald, I'd like to add on to, this is Carla with the Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest majority of those that I bill are municipality governments and then other state agencies. The challenge, to back onto what she was saying, is I get a lot of, we never received it. And so most of my invoices I print out of SFMA, and so I only get a hard copy that I send through the mail, and their mailroom or whoever their staff is not scanning it to those remote workers who are processing the payments. So I get a lot of, well, can you email this to like a shared email box? But yeah, so that's been a big challenge, is that I get that quite a bit, that we never received it. And I think there's a disconnect, and things aren't getting processed from where it's received through the mailroom to the right staff.
Thank you for that. Is that, you mentioned that, it's not getting to the field offices, as one example. Do you think that with some of those local governments, do you think some of their staff turnover may be also contributing to, they don't know who to forward it to, if, they haven't seen it before maybe, or something like that? Is that
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that as well, is that the contacts that I used to have are no longer there, whether it's the small governments or even other state agencies as well too. And it just seems to be, I get a lot of, because of remote work factors that are contributing to invoices not getting processed.
okay? Thank
So
you
yeah,
for that.
staff turnover does seem to be a big issue too.
Anything else? Well, it sounds like staffing is part of it, both internal and external. And then the ability to find sources of garnishment. Any other challenges to accounts receivable that anyone would like to share? Or if anybody has found workarounds to the issues that have been raised, please feel free to bring that up as well. Okay, well, hearing none, I won't leave everybody to sit and wonder who will talk next. Does anybody have anything for roundtable? This can be not just an AR challenge, it can just be any question, comment, need, things like that. Feel free to share that.
This is Heidi. I was wondering if you foresee any new additions to the ARPM or LFO requirements for this year?
I do not. Since we made the formatting changes, I'll call it that, to the ARPM, with the calculation for the collection targets, being the biggest one there. I don't see any changes to the data, so that will continue. And then from LFO's perspective, I have not heard that they plan on adding any new fields. In fact, I think they're kind of to the point now where they want to touch the system as little as possible. I'll put it that way, just because it creates some challenges for them when they do add new fields and how it, all the data behind the scenes connects. I don't think it's, I'll call it the most robust system. So, they have to be careful about how they add some of those things. So I do not know of any planned changes for either the ARPM or LFO reporting. Any other questions, topics for roundtable?
Hi, Gerald. This is Anna with DOC.
Hey.
Do you expect a lot of changes with payroll moving to Workday and AR requests increasing? What do you think will happen with that?
From what I know of the transition to Workday, it's more around having one system that keeps track of the leave balances and the pay, pay rates and that type of thing. The information still connects into SFMA for accounting purposes. What I would probably expect to see is a little bit of an increase in staff that might get overpaid as the transition occurs starting in December, because maybe somebody doesn't get their, for example, if you're management service and your time is already pre-populated and you have to go in and put in an exception for being gone, if that exception has a result in the leave without pay and now you've been overpaid versus how it was done in e-payroll, I could see where that would be, you know, a slight increase to some accounts receivable that would be established. Hopefully it's a small, you know, percentage of folks that have that happen to them. But I do, you know, there's always the risk of any new type of process that some people are not going to understand all the nuances of it, and there's going to be some consequences of missed records. I'll put it that way, missed entries. But other than that, I mean, because the process of what was done in e-payroll is just now done in a different system, so to speak. Hopefully, it's not a significant, you know, again, number of occurrences, but I do think there's always that risk whenever you have a new system.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Comments, roundtable? Okay, well, that is all I had for this agenda. Our next meeting will be on January 17th at 2 p.m. We are now on our odd month schedule, so January, March, May, etc. will be our new time frame for the ARC meetings. And please know that on the Swarm website, the upcoming dates are posted here. So, you know, I know I've had a few folks say I didn't have it on my calendar. A while back, we did have actual invites that would go out, but it was so hard to maintain with new people coming on and things like that to do an invite. So we post these dates here. Please feel free to add these dates to your own calendar for future purposes, but it is the third Tuesday of every odd month of the year. So we will see everyone at the next ARC meeting on January 17th. If I don't speak to you before then, have a wonderful new year and holiday season. And we'll talk to you all again in January.
Thanks, Gerald.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.